What we're going to be carving today is a scallop shell. Fairly easy to do, and the great thing about it is it gives you a lot of practice at learning how to read the grain direction. You can see our grain runs left to right in our shell. Now this one's carved out of the solid. Like I said, that's not applied to this crest rail, but we're going to carve a separate piece that you could actually apply to any piece of furniture you like. And we're going to run the grain direction the same way, left to right. We have to lower this area in here to be able to carve the scallops. We're going to carve convex and concave lobes right in here. Okay. And the idea is we want to have a nice even ridge that separates those two pieces. What that's going to do is, by creating this, well, let's talk a little bit more about the contour of the shell. The high point is right here, and it drops down and almost hollows out here. It gets, sort of flat in here and then slightly rounded off. And then from that high point, it all rounds off down to the background. Now, what that's doing is that's pulling our grain direction into the third dimension. So now as we carve these convex and concave lobes, we're going to need to really pay attention to which way those fibers are stacking up. And we're going to cover how to lay out and the tools that you need and how to carve a scallop shell. Now that we know what we're going to do and why, let's take a look at everything we need to be able to do it. So the first thing you can see here is I've got some carving tools. Now, these 8 tools to me represent what you're going to need to do about 80 to 90% of all the carving you're ever going to need to do for furniture. Obviously, if you're going to do a lot of acanthus leaf or something like that, you might want to add some supplemental tools, but this is going to get you through trifid feet, ball and claw feet, all that kind of stuff. So let's take a look at what we've got. The first thing is, this is a 6mm number 15 V parting tool. And again, I'm using the Feel or Swiss made sizes and sweeps. If you're using a different manufacturer, you may want to do some research to cross-reference to get these sizes. This is about a 60-degree angle. That's what the 15 stands for. If you wanted to go to a 12, which is about a 45-degree angle, that's fine too. I just prefer the narrower sweep, and we're going to use this for lining out the lobes of our shell. The next chisel I've got is a 10mm number 9. It's a fairly deep gouge, got a good almost half round shape to it, and it's large enough that we're going to be able to really sweep those concave sections at the outermost part of the shell. This is going to help to scallop the outside of the shell. This is a 16mm, number 7. A little bit shallower, and you can see it's not quite as deep a shape. It's much smaller portion of the circle. The next size I've got is a 5mm number 8. This is going to be really great for getting in at those narrow portions of the shell back at the very bottom. This is a 7mm number 8. And the great thing about this one is it's going to be able to make the transition between those narrow sweeps at the base of the shell and our next tool, which is a 10mm number 8, which we're going to use for some of the upper portions of the concave lobes. So this is going to be the transition chisel between the small number 8 and the big one. And you can see so far I don't really have much besides 7s, 8s, and 9s as far as the sweep goes. The higher the number, the more acute or smaller the radius of the circle is that you're getting. These last two are actually sort of luxury chisels. I like to use them for the convex lobes. If you are on a limited budget, grab these 6 first because they're really going to help you get through everything. When you can afford it, grab these. These are 2 back bent gouges. They're both number 25s, which refers to that sweep and the fact that it's bent on the back side. This is a 6mm, and that's around a 10mm. That's really all you're ever going to need. I've got a good sharp set of bench chisels that I'm going to use, some double-faced tape to help hold my material down. Once we've cut out the shell pattern, I'm going to actually stick it to a piece of plywood. Not this one, this is going to be for my pattern. I've got a pair of dividers, a compass to help me do the layout, something to measure with, a couple of combination squares to be able to mark different dimensions, and a good sharp pencil. And that is pretty much all you need to be able to carve a scallop shell. Well, let's get started with our layout. So I've got a little cheat sheet here because there's an awful lot of dimensions and radii that we need to know to be able to lay this out. Normally, I strike a center line on my pattern board and I freehand sketch it. If that's what you'd like to do, that's fine. But we thought for this instance, since this is very likely your very first shell, we wanted to give you something where you could reproduce exactly what I'm carving here in the video in your shop, and all the dimensions and everything should be relative to what I'm doing. So the way I start is we start by drawing a center line. So we're just gonna scribe a center line up there. Now our shell is 4 5/8 inches wide and it's 4 9/16 high. It's just the way I sketched it out. If you want to make it 4 5/8 by 4 5/8, that's fine. You'll need to adjust some of your dimensions on the radii that we're going to strike here in a minute. So just as a ballpark, I'm going to, since it's 4 5/8 wide, set it on the 3 and I'm going to come out 1, 2, and 5/16, and 1, 2, and 5/16. That should give me 4 5/8 wide. So what I'm going to do is just create a little bounding box here. The next thing we need to do is just mark a center point. Now I mark it way up above center because a lot of my radii are going to come off the bottom of this board, so I want to shift up to the top. And since it's 4 9/16 high, that's 2 5/8, 2 5/16, a 30-second light. So 2 5/16, a 30-second light. And those points there represent the outermost points of my shell. So we want to keep those in mind as we're working along here. The next thing I've done is I have set my compass right at 2 9/16. And this radius is going to give us a fair number of parts of our scallop and parts of the shell as well. So we've got 2 9/16 set on our compass. The first thing we need to do is we're going to start by marking off these two sections of the scallop first. So I'm going to come down 1 13/16, which is the dimension I need. So it's right there. And then I want to come over 2 1/16 off of either side of that center line. So 1, 2, and 1/16. 1, 2, and 1/16. If you want to use a combination square to get these a little more accurate, that's fine. So you can see I've got 2 pivot points right there. And what I want to do, set my compass at 2 9/16 right on that pivot point. And what I want to do is strike up and around and strike up and around. Now that's going to give me the basic, this cut and that cut on my scallop. The next thing this radius does is we're going to come up and create the 2 verticals that come off of this. Again, my shell is upside down if you're looking at it in, the camera there. So we need to come over 4 3/8 from the center line. So I'm going to measure from the 1 inch mark because that's always the most accurate. So I'm going to come over, that'll make it 5 3/8. And then I'm going to come over this way, I'll put it at the 5 3/8 and mark the 1 inch line. Just remember when you're doing this, you're burning an inch. And I'm going to take those lines up a little bit here so that I have a line that I can mark my cross mark on. And now we need to come up 3 inches off the baseline. Gotta make sure I can see all of my notes on my cheat sheet, or what good is it? So, yep, I've actually already got a mark there at 3 inches. And I'm gonna mark this one, hold the wand, and mark that one at 3 inches. Take my compass, set it right into those 2 points, and strike my vertical. And you can see we're starting to, if I flip this around here this way, bring it in, you're starting to see how this line relates to that one, this one relates to this one, and we're moving right along here. This line, this diameter also does one more pivot point. We need to measure 2 inches high. 1, 2. And then off of my center line, I want to measure 3 1/16. So 4 1/16 to the 1, and 1 to the 4 1/16, right there. And now I'm going to set my combination square right at that 2-inch line, because that's a little far to do with your fingers. Believe me, I've done it. I'm just not interested in doing it for this video. So right there and right there, we can. So those are 2 more pivot points. And what they're going to give us is the interior mark on the scallop. So I'm going to come straight around to that point, just like that. So we're almost done the bottom half of the shell. The next thing we want to do is reset our compass down to a 3/4 inch radius. Put the lead right onto my lowermost point of my shell, and bring that bottom right around there till it meets all those lines. Now if I go back in and I erase everything we don't need, you can start to see the bottom of this shell taking place fairly nicely here. Oops, I erased a little bit that I needed. I'm just going to sketch it right back in. Because once I cut this out and start to shape it up, any minor variations and bumps that I have are all going to go away. All right, so you can see we're getting a fairly decent bottom of that shell shape. We've got things sort of coming together nicely. The next radius we want to set on our compass is 2 5/16, which is going to be the overall sweep of the top of our shell. So set it at 2 5/16, right there. Put the lead right on the outermost point of my shell. Set my pivot right onto my center line, and now I'm going to strike that line straight around, point to point. Excellent. Now, since my shell scallops in and out, I want to know the innermost point too, and that's about a 1/4 inch less in diameter. So if we're at 2 5/16, we want to take this down to about 2 1/16. So far, it's just the hard part's keeping track of all the numbers, isn't it? Go right back into our pivot point. If I can find it there we go. And then just strike a very light line that represents the innermost portion of our scallops. Now I'll take my divider, and I've got it set at 7/8 of an inch. So I've got those 2 radii there. The first thing we want to do is come off our center about 7/16 on that outside diameter. So 7/16 over, 7/16 over. And that gives me the dimension of that center lobe. So if I've got this laid out right, this one's convex. This one will be concave. This next one will be convex. The next one, concave. And that final one, convex. Looks like I got it. Sometimes it works out. So 7/8 over, 7/8 over, 7/8 over, and that gives us 7/8 there. Now, if you want to use a circle template or something like that to create these, that's fine. I'm just going to sketch them in. What I want to do is, this is my middle of my concave lobe. So what I want to do is sweep a nice even semicurve coming right up from the middle of my concave to the middle of my convex. And then I want to do the exact same thing on this side. Sweep down. I like mine to be just a little on the asymmetrical side because, you know, you don't find shells in nature that are absolutely perfectly symmetrical. So if there's a little variation, that actually to me is a good thing. So then I'm going to just sweep that back right there like that. So you can see that wasn't too hard, right? Let's try and see if I can do it again on the other side. Come in middle there and sweep up. Now the beauty of this is you could also take some tracing paper. Once you've got the one side lined out, lay it on there, trace it, flip it, sketch it back in there because, you know, you'll have graphite on the top side. You flip the paper over. Now when you draw it from the other side, it will automatically transfer to this side. So if you want to get your lefts and rights dead on perfectly even, again, either use a circle template or tracing paper is a great idea. You can just buy some vellum at your local art supply. And it's a really good way of, there we go. So not too shabby, you know, for my first try ever at this. So we'll erase those lines that we no longer need, and you'll see that we've got a pretty good looking scallop shell. Fairly painlessly. I'm going to make some minor corrections. I can see I have a slight bump right here. So what I need to do is sort of bring this over a little more and sweep that in. I'll take care of that once I head into the bandsaw and cut this thing out.